All right. Hello, everyone out in the internet world. I'm really excited today to introduce our community to Gina Abraham, who is our new clinical research program manager. For those of you that may not know, I'm Betsy Pilon. I am the executive director of Hope for HIE. And Hope for HIE is in our 10th year as an official nonprofit organization, connecting and supporting over 10,000 families worldwide with HIE and accelerating awareness, advocacy, education, research, and support for neonatal and pediatric acquired HIE, which is hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. So Gina is new to our team. We are thrilled to have her here and talk through what her role is going to be working on. Many of you who are in our community know that the past couple of years, we have really accelerated the research portion. And so our scope prior to, I think, 4 years ago was really focused on 3 pillars: awareness, education, and support. And as we've grown over the past 4 years, we've added advocacy and research to those buckets. So now we really have nice five buckets there of what we do. And as you all have seen, the research side of things is really accelerating. And it's really exciting to see so much in the landscape of HIE and its related impacts. We did a webinar last night with the Cerebral Palsy Research Network. So if you missed that, you can get that on replay as well. We'll share that link afterwards in this key takeaway as well. But that's something that Gina's going to be working on as a part of her role. And so, Gina, I'd love to introduce you to everyone. So everyone meet Gina.
Hello.
And Gina, can you talk a little bit about your professional journey and what led you to this role?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, world. My name's Gina. I just recently joined Hope for HIE in early October. I'm thrilled to be here. As Betsy said, I'm the new clinical research program manager for the organization, and I'm really excited to be a part of the team and doing this super important work. So my professional experience has kind of been, and you can, oh, my dog Wally has made an appearance. Say hello. Um, my journey here, I've kind of worn a lot of hats, to be honest with you, but I'm really happy that I ended up here. My educational experience actually is somewhat related. I do have a master's in clinical research administration, and when I graduated with that master's degree, I knew I wanted to work in the clinical research field. I worked as a clinical research coordinator at CS Mott Children's Hospital in Michigan, in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I was there for about 6 or 7 years. And when I was there, my clinical focus was really on infants and toddlers with congenital heart defects. And these are kiddos that are having open heart surgery before the age of 3, occasionally several open heart surgeries before the age of 3, and who are recovering in the pediatric cardiothoracic ICU after their surgery. So there was a lot of research going on with these kiddos and trying to figure out how to improve their outcomes, how to decrease the appearance of complications throughout their ICU stay, and really just overall how to make them healthy and happy kids. And so at the time, my responsibilities were enrolling patients into clinical trials, both for NIH and industry sponsored trials. So the NIH sponsored trial that we were working on was actually the largest pediatric clinical trial at the time. I'm sure it has been outdone since then, but it was a collaboration between the University of Michigan and Boston Children's Hospital. And it was testing whether managing children's blood glucose levels by administering insulin after surgery would actually improve their outcomes in the ICU. And so we enrolled about 300 patient families at the University of Michigan into this trial, which was huge. And I think about 400 patients got enrolled into the trial at Boston Children's. So it was quite a large trial. That study has since been published, and you can actually find that, yes, insulin does help with patients' outcomes in the ICU after surgery. So that's something, if you're super interested, you can do a quick Google for the tech study, TECS, and see what that's all about. And on the industry side, I was also responsible for enrolling families into novel therapeutic trials for cardiomyopathy. So working on enrolling patients into those trials, coordinating and scheduling follow-up visits with those patients, and making sure that they were kind of sticking to the protocol, sticking to the medications, all of those fun things. Um, On the academic side, while I was at the University of Michigan, I also was responsible for helping clinicians build and structure a cardiothoracic registry. So this was kind of novel at the time, and we'll talk a little bit about what a registry is and how I'll be working on the registry that's going to be focused on HIE kiddos coming up here. But at the time, this was a pretty novel idea because what we were doing was collecting about 150 to 200, I think at minimum, pieces of data on every patient, every child that was being admitted to the pediatric cardiothoracic ICU at the University of Michigan. And we were collecting all of those pieces of data and using them to figure out how to improve quality outcomes, how maybe we can change the standard of care to make sure that patients are doing better in the ICU after their surgery. And we were also using that data to publish and study to study a bunch of different hypotheses and publish on those hypotheses from that large amount of data. We then realized it would be probably really helpful if we were able to expand the scope of participating institutions outside of just U of M. So then we started to enroll institutions across the country. And so by the time I think I had left U of M, there were about 30 institutions that were participating, meaning there were 30 PCTUs that were constantly kind of feeding this stream of data into this registry, which was amazing. And that really was pretty incredible because one of the novel pieces about this registry and this consortium was that the participating institutions and the participating physicians could actually log in to a database, a live kind of like real-time web-based platform, and compare the outcomes of their hospitals to other hospitals. And because of that kind of the competitive nature that there was at the time between these institutions, it was kind of unheard of for institutions to be able to kind of see results from other hospitals and compare and contrast maybe what people were doing better at one institution and better at the other institution that would kind of improve the overall quality of life for these patients. And so that was really the three main areas of focus during my time at U of M. I left U of M and transitioned to the legal industry. And prior to me joining Hope, I was actually an associate director for at a consulting firm. And I was the associate director of a team that was responsible for using large language models and generative AI to help lawyers find relevant pieces of information that they would need for their upcoming legal investigations or trials. And so that was really fun because I got to really dig my nails, my feet and everything into kind of the technology aspect of, how really AI is going to be able to transform not just the legal industry, but we're kind of looking at how this is going to be even helpful for our HIE community here. I know there's some work being done by some folks out there that are thinking that, hey, maybe we can have just like chat GPT, maybe we can have like an HIE chat GPT, right, for families that have questions about their diagnosis, that just want answers and maybe just want some initial guidance on how they really should be kind of following their patient's care or their children's care. And so actually, that was in August of 2024 is when, I'm going to skip a little bit here forward, when my husband and I adopted our daughter, Juniper, and she was in the NICU for 2 weeks after she was born. And kind of coming out of that experience of being in the NICU with her and being a NICU parent, I knew I really wanted to do something for work that was a little bit closer to home, and that would kind of help families who are going through experiences similar and different to mine. But I knew I wanted to do something that was going to be more of a community outreach, making sure that I was really helping families and members of this community. So Betsy gave me this incredible opportunity to join the Hope for HIE team, and I am here now. So thank you so much, Betsy.
Well, I mean, we're just so lucky and honestly grateful to have you on board. Many of you know that the past 2 years in particular in my role have been, it feels like 90% of my time has been spent connecting with researchers, working with our community to give input on, developing clinical trials, what that whole process looks like, tapping into the brain trust that we have of our community who have participated in clinical trials. And then, I have connected with at least 25 research groups over the past 2 years who have something in the hopper, moving from a preclinical process to hoping to enroll in clinical trials. And this is not just neonatal HIE. This is also outside of the acute period in the NICU. And so with this, renaissance of research, it really has been such a large focus that we have needed to grow and meet that need. So Gina's working on all sorts of different projects already. I'm thrilled to be able to introduce her to our colleagues and researchers and the groups that we've been working with, because it's a lot. It is a role for sure. And to expand out the team. And one of the things, and we're going to talk about a few different projects that you're already taking on and really accelerating forward. But a lot of we've talked about the STAR study, we've talked about Cool Prime, these two active studies that are enrolling babies, and that we know that a lot of our families have shared their experience of being enrolled in studies and the gaps and barriers that happen. Neonatal trials in particular have a high attrition rate, meaning a lot of families will opt out after a certain period of time because it's so overwhelming to stay in the study sometimes. And a lot of that comes down to study design. And when you don't have patient families giving input in that, it just is kind of, these trials are really resource intensive. So they're expensive to run. They require a lot of personnel. I mean, every study site, when we talk about like the terms multi-center study, right? We're talking about multiple hospitals and health systems that are involved with multiple people at each one, and all sorts of protocols that have to be put in place for safety, for, we're not even a lot of times talking about if something is effective. We're looking at safety studies, and looking at what they call the pharmacokinetics about it. Like, what does the chemical reaction happen in healthy adults? Like the process, a lot of times will start preclinically. They look at the safety profile in animals before they move to humans. And when they move to humans, I think it's a requirement that all of these studies have to go through healthy adults first for a new therapeutic, at least. And if something has been on the market for adults, it has to have a safety profile for babies and children, which are not little adults. They have different, physiologies. So there's a lot that goes into these. And, we know that currently today we have one therapeutic intervention, which is cooling, which is therapeutic hypothermia. It doesn't work for all babies. It cannot be done in all resource settings. And this is not just, we have a very large US-based audience, but Hope for HIE does connect over 10,000 families worldwide. And when we talk about the incidence of HIE, 2 to 3 per thousand live births seems like a lot in high-income countries like the US and the UK and across Europe. But the bulk of HIE really happens in these low and middle income countries. 95% of HIE happens in low and middle income countries. So the next gen is to look at what is feasible to be done in across all resources to improve life for these babies. And that's, in conjunction with prevention, right? And so a lot of HIE, when we talk about prevention, and especially in low and middle income countries, that's better prenatal care, better birth care, all of that. And we've made a significant dent in high income countries to reduce the incidence of HIE. It's remained pretty stable over the past couple of decades, but we have a lot of room to grow. And one of the things that plagues us right now is long-term data, because a lot of the studies, the funding runs out after 2 years. It's hard to wait 8 years for something to show if it's effective or not. So they're looking at how we can be smart with identifying biomarkers early on. I was just in a meeting about looking at, is there a blood test with different plasma markers that we can look at that are tied to cognitive outcomes later on that we can look at and accelerate. So there's just all sorts of stuff, like lots of deep, deep science things.
Yes.
But looping back around, that's just the big preface to say that the responsibilities of work for this include several different things. One, looking at our active studies. So looking at the active study partnerships, Cool Prime, STAR study, and then looking at building this registry that we had the webinar about last night, announced funding for. So I'd love to hear more from your perspective, and you can share out with families about what you've been working on and, and kind of where you are digging in.
Yeah, I'd love to. So, kind of calling back to what you were saying about those academic and industry partnerships, really a lot of the role is going to be forming relationships with researchers and clinicians, not only here in the US, but across the world, who are actively investigating these new treatments and therapies for HIE, and really educating those folks on how the Hope for HIE Halo of Support model benefits their work. So, the Halo of Support model is something that I think is super important to just the overall mission of Hope for HIE. And really what it means, just kind of at a very high level overview, is providing support to both participating families and also researchers and investigators to make sure that these trials are establishing support services for families, right? So, you mentioned trial attrition. This is something that plagues a lot of studies, right? When families become too overwhelmed to keep participating in trials because maybe the researchers have asked these parents to come back to the hospital for a 2-day visit when they've only been home with their baby for 6 or 7 weeks, and maybe they live 5 hours away, and it's just not feasible for this family to get back in a car, drive 5 hours, stay. Who wants to do that? Stay in a hospital for longer than they have to. Really, no one wants to do that, right? So making sure that not only are these trial protocols not too burdensome for families, but also working with families and researchers to brainstorm solutions for keeping trial attrition low. And sometimes that just means making sure that the channels of communication are open and everyone's on the same page about what resources are available to families who are participating in these trials, and actually even families who may not be participating in these trials. So, for example, one of the studies that's actively recruiting right now, which is the STAR study, and it's one of those trials that is actually looking at a novel therapeutic for treatment of HIE. This is a study that's enrolling babies in the NICU, and they're enrolling babies pretty quickly after birth. So, a lot of the studies, one of the hindrances to family participation is the fact that consent to participate in these trials has to be achieved within 6 hours after birth so that these therapeutics can have the most efficacy. And they need to be given to these babies within a certain amount of time after they're born. And so, families make the decision, yes, I want to be in this trial. They go through all the protocol in the NICU, they get discharged, but they're maybe not communicated with the fact that there's reimbursement money available to them for the remaining participation in the studies, right? If they need to do a phone survey or they need to come back into the hospital, making sure that they know that, hey, there's money there, there's services there, there's support there to arrange transportation for you, to make sure that you have lodging and food and have all the things to make your stay comfortable. Researchers are always more than willing to make sure that families are taken care of, but sometimes that gets lost in communication because it's the clinical research coordinator enrolling the families in the NICU, but then it's the nurses that are taking care of the babies in the NICU. It's the physicians that are discharging them from the NICU, and sometimes that clinical research coordinator doesn't come get to see the family before they leave and remind them, right, of all the things that are available to them. Um, so really making sure that we're supporting both families and researchers, making sure that families know that they have access to social worker and child life programs through Hope for HIE, both for families that are enrolled and not enrolled. Like I was saying before, the STAR study, what I love about this, one of my most favorite things is that even if families are being approached to participate in the study and they just don't feel comfortable doing it and they say no, guess what? Hope for HIE is still there for them, right? They still get all of this amazing information and all these access to resources, access to our social work team, access to the community of HIE families, which I think is super important. And one of the other things that I think is super important about my role is also ensuring that researchers are focusing on the outcomes that mean the most to parents and families. One of the things that I found so shocking when I started here and started learning about HIE is that there are currently no published long-term follow-up guidelines for HIE, which I think is just bananas, right? Like this is just crazy to me. So I know Betsy's been working with a lot of physicians out there to kind of start these conversations and form these long-term follow-up guidelines. But sometimes researchers and investigators, they're not the ones living with these kiddos at home, right? They're not the ones seeing how these kids are kind of getting through their day-to-day lives. They're not the ones noticing things that parents would notice. And so giving voices to the families that are participating in these trials, to say, hey, I think it's great that you want to give my kid an MRI, but also I think we should really talk about how my kid's behaving at school right now. Like there may be things that, you didn't even think to ask as a physician, like, behavioral issues, developmental issues that aren't being addressed. And so making sure that researchers and physicians are also focusing on those outcomes that parents really, really care about is a big part of the role as well. Um, in terms of the HIE registry work, this is something that's super exciting. Betsy, like you said, we had a webinar on this last night, which was great. It was very well attended. Everyone was very enthusiastic about this. But we are currently working with CPRN and Dr. Danielle Barber out of Colorado Children's, among a litany of other super brilliant physicians who are on the team as well. And we're structuring and building out the community-based portion of the HIE registry. So really the goal of this registry is, I guess it's threefold. There's three aims. The first one is collecting data on kiddos who are in the NICU, who are diagnosed with HIE, and grabbing those clinical pieces of data from their electronic medical record, things like, MRI results, things like vital signs, anything that would help us kind of learn about the patient's journey in the NICU, and putting all of that data into a registry that's, again, available for quality outcome improvement, for research opportunity. And what's really unique about the HIE registry is not only will we be collecting clinical data, but the super cool part of this is that we're also going to be collecting community-based data from parents and from folks out there, either with kiddos that have been diagnosed with HIE or adults with HIE themselves, and collecting data points related to their experience, their family experience, parent experience with an HIE diagnosis, and kind of trying to maybe develop those long-term developmental outcomes with kiddos with HIE. So that community-based data is actually going to be connected to the clinical data on the back end via what we call a CRID, or a unique identifier. And that's really going to be able to paint such a fuller picture of how that patient is going to be kind of doing throughout their life than looking just solely at the data you would get from an electronic medical record or a clinical record. And so being able to really collect that community-based information and marry it along with the clinical-based information is really going to do wonders, again, for improving quality of life outcomes, and also for kind of allowing just such a huge amount of data to be available out there for researchers and investigators to start digging into, and start hypothesizing and start publishing on as soon as it's available. So I'm very much looking forward to getting that up and running. We're currently in the pilot phase, so really we're kind of just in proof of concept phase at the moment. And eventually, the goal is to expand beyond the 2 sites that we have right now and make this as big as I think as big as we can. Right? There's really no limit on how much data and how much data is out there and how much we want to collect. So those are really that was a lot. Those are really the things I've been focusing on, but it's all super exciting. And so it's been great to work on these things so far.
Yeah. And it's just been amazing. I will say, like, Gina's first meeting with the registry group, it was so refreshing to me. I was like, I keep saying this, the cavalry has arrived. And Gina just dug right in, asked so many wonderful questions, and the team is just so excited to have her working with us. And, I know a lot of this stuff is really, really can be overwhelming with like the jargon that's used and all of that. But we always aim to help families understand what we're doing, how you can get involved, why we're doing it. And I think as people engage in our community, they see the need, especially for this push for this long-term outcome data that is just not in existence.
Correct.
And, just personal anecdotes. And, I feel like I say this a lot, but sometimes it doesn't translate. So maybe I'll say it again. One, like case study example, we see people that, one that just happened today, early, it's anything from early on, of how many families have secondary microcephaly, which is a small head growth because of their impact of HIE, that get referred to neurosurgery incorrectly and thinking that their soft spots are closing up early, when really it's just the slow brain growth that's not expanding the skull like it would in a non-affected HIE kiddo. which is a quality improvement issue, right? Like, do we need to be referring families to neurosurgery and exacerbating their worries? Or can we give good counsel and have that pathway change a little bit? Two, how many kids do go on to develop epilepsy after age 4 who
Right.
have nothing, until then, until some point in development? My child developed epilepsy at age 8, he's now 12. Where is that data? It doesn't exist. And so, this registry, we can start collecting that data and having families put it in. So this first phase, and it's always like a hurry up and wait. But
Yeah, it does feel like
where
that.
can we sign up? How can we get involved right now? And it's coming.
Yes.
but first and foremost, this concept, and again, there's so many moving parts that I think it's hard to understand until you're in the weeds with this, just how this is actually moving very fast for what it is, but it's still not like tomorrow, right? So we have to test things, and there's very good reasons for that. Someone brought up like data and privacy and all of that last night in the webinar.
Yes.
Which is a huge factor, right? We want to do this the right way. We see other groups out there that are like, oh, we use this random system and then collect all this stuff. We want to collect it the right way because we want to make sure that this actually advances the science, that this actually improves outcomes, that this actually improves our understanding of HIE without, with trying to decrease the amount of bias that we bring into it, and that this can be something that can be implemented globally. So that way it benefits our whole community. I think it's important to note that when we were seeking a partner for this, one, we were like, why recreate the wheel if someone else is already doing this well, right? And is there something we can extend out? So that's why we had a lot of people, our medical advisory board, who already works with Cerebral Palsy Research Network, suggest that we work with them because they already have a CP registry, but they don't have that early identification data of at-risk groups like HIE. And so this is a perfect partnership. We talked about this last night a little bit more, but they already have a robust data privacy, structure already implemented. They work with the University of Pittsburgh's data center, which is very secure. They're experts in doing this. Paul Gross, who's the executive director and president, founder, whatever all Paul's titles are for CPRN. He's a data guy. He, has a background from Microsoft. Privacy and protection is like embedded in his core. His core being. When he was building, and this is the second registry that he's built, the CPRN he also has built like a hydrocephalus registry. So he's a registry guru. And so he knows that he's brought the people to the right place, the right places to build this. And so why would we want to recreate that? They already also have that buy-in. They have 35 plus sites already on CPRN's platform. And then part of this is also data harmonization. So when you talk about registries that exist already out in the world, how can those registries talk to each other? And these registries, just so you know, when researchers go in, it's de-identified data. So there are privacy protections in place for this data. There's opt-outs, there's all sorts of things, that are a part of this. But what we want to look at is what are these like common data elements, which is a big buzz phrase in registry building that allows for other registries to talk to one another and for the data to be pulled out and have it be consistent, right? So you can learn much more because HIE is big and it's bigger in other places, like I mentioned earlier. So, I think when families are like, is this worldwide? Yes, especially the community registry is absolutely going to be worldwide.
Yeah.
It's the site data is something that I'm guessing as we move and grow is going to be a combination of the sites that we're collecting from in the CPRN network, and then others outside of that network will either be able to, one, opt in, or two, will be able to harmonize the data because we're going to move this advocacy forward for these common data elements. So that way, all of these systems can talk. We get a bigger cohort that we can analyze instead of like the problem I think that a lot of families see is, you're looking at a cohort of like 20 kids, and you could look
Right.
at 20 different research studies of 20 different cohorts of 20 kids and have 20 different answers because of the
Absolutely.
very wide scope of HIE. So
Yep.
this is giving more again unbiased data. Is looking at they call it powered, right, like
Mm-hmm.
studies. If it's a lower power study, sometimes you can't make those conclusions from it because
Yes.
that's a significant limitation, is how many people. So the more we have, the more we can make those conclusions and evolve the science, which is really important, obviously, when we do this work. So I know there's some comments across the different sites that we are streaming to right now about people feeling seen and heard with this work. And I'm so glad, because this is why we're doing it. We know that these are the things, age-old problems that our community has talked about for years, right? And we're able to have the resourcing, both in, people, so Gina and others on staff, to actually do this work. Volunteerism only takes you so far. That's just the reality, right? So
Yep.
we need dedicated resources to this. So we're really excited for Gina, again, to be here and to take on this work, and to grow it out. And there are going to be multiple opportunities, as we've had before. If anyone's filled out those surveys that we continue to push out in conjunction with researchers, this is going to make it less clunky. That's the whole idea,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
So if you're opting into the registry, when it's ready to have you sign up, we want to make this sign up really easy. We want to make it something that is meaningful to you. We want to have a platform that families can, it's not just a research platform, but something that families can engage in for the community. We've heard you loud and clear that Facebook groups have limitations, and we know that as well, right, from support, and that a lot of people don't like to engage in social media, but still want that community and have that access to the programs, our Super SIBS programs, our SOAR programs, our peer support programs, that side of it too. So we're working on developing something that is going to allow you to opt in as a member of Hope for HIE and have access to all of those programs and services. You'll be able to update your mailing address. So if you signed, which I know Deanna in the background is like
jumping for
all
joy.
these programs that people have signed up for, people move, and then it's like, what's the process to update address?
Mm-hmm.
So a much more traditional membership experience than just like, I'm a member of a Facebook group and I'm a member of an email list and all of that. So it just synthesizing all this data is really, really important, and protecting it as well.
Yep.
And then the research component has its own stuff where you would opt into and consent into the research studies that you get sent information about. So, a great example of that. And I know we're running over, so we'll wrap this up. But a great example, so people understand, is if your child, for instance, like experienced neonatal seizures, and we have a new neonatal seizure study, we can just, like, if you sign up and say, yep, my child has this and this initial profile that we'll collect, then we can send you those studies, and you can, you don't have to get all, if we have a bunch of different studies going on, which we hope that we do, you won't get like studies that are not applicable to you. If you're a part of the loss community, we know in particular that having a legacy from your loss in your child's life is greatly important to you. We believe that through research, that this is an exceptional way to be able to extend that legacy of your child. And that we always get asks from our loss community of how they can participate, how they can have their child's information help research. And this is another great way that we can do so. We know in particular, I'm thinking of another case study before we wrap up with this, of families who had sudden unexpected death in childhood. That was not something expected, of like a slow decline, which can happen with some of our kids. And we want, we raised the red flags to the existing registries and said, hey, is anyone else seeing this, especially with post-COVID? Is there something associated with COVID infection? That's impacting our kids. Like, and there's a study that's going on with that. So, there's a lot of different things that we can do that we hope and are excited to do with this work. And so Gina, right side, there we go. Gina will be helping with that. And really just so, again, happy that you're on our team. It's been so wonderful to work with you already. And I know that Gina will also be working with a lot of our families when we need to source these focus groups and look at how we can better partner with these researchers to look at what matters most to families instead of lumping together the things that researchers have traditionally done.
Yeah.
All right. With that, Gina, hit us with your favorite resources for our community members when it comes to learning about research, clinical trials, all the things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I may be a bit biased, but I think the Hope for HIE website is truly like the best place to start, in my opinion. So for folks that are interested in looking at current and upcoming clinical trials that are relevant to the HIE community, go to the Hope for HIE website. There's an option right at the top of the page. You'll see it says for parents. When you click on that for parents link, you're going to see another menu drop down, and it's going to say Clinical Trial and Research Study Hub. This is like Research Study 101. It's literally everything you need to know about what it means to participate in the clinical trial. If you do decide to enroll yourself or your child into a trial, it gives you a glossary of terms that people might start throwing at you that you've never heard before. You're like, what is this? What does this even mean? You can go look and see what all these terms mean. What things might you expect to be asked of you, right? Do you think you'll have to potentially come back for more follow-ups, more surveys, things like that? And it also, in addition to kind of listing what it means to be a participant in a clinical trial, what will you get out of this? It's also going to show you a list of all of the current and upcoming trials that are relevant to our families and our patients. So within the HIE community, of course, but also expanding to some other diagnoses. There's some neurodevelopmental trials on there, trials that are studying epilepsy, trials that are studying cerebral palsy, and autism. So if you're interested in looking at any of those, please go ahead and click those links. If you do click the links, it's going to take you to my second favorite website, which is clinicaltrials.gov. And that is going to be a website that's going to provide you with a lot more detail about the study protocols, the study's hypotheses, the way that the structure is studied, how many participants they're looking to enroll, what kinds of follow-up are they looking to achieve there. So that's really going to be a deep dive. So if you find any trials on the Hope for HIE website that are calling out to you and speaking to you, go ahead and click the link that's listed under each trial, and it's going to take you right to the clinicaltrials.gov webpage. And it's going to also just give you information on how to enroll in a study. If you do see, like I said, a study that's kind of calling out to you, how to get involved, and some contact information to help you start that follow-up process. So that's where I would start, the Hope for HIE website. Is that a shocker? Probably not to anybody, but I think it's really the best resource that we have out there right now.
Yeah, and we're getting asks all the time from different research groups, from different clinical trials with affiliated, organizations and things to put those studies on that website. So we're trying to do that and keeping that updated. And that's really a nice portal. So, and then we're also trying to communicate about the ones that we put on there as well. I think once we're able, so we're looking at in the next 6 to 12 months, getting this engagement platform up and running, that you'll see that we'll be able to have you sign up for different alerts that you want. So if you are interested in more, studies about epilepsy or CP or autism or hearing or vision or any way that cognition, that you slice and dice HIE outcomes, that will be able to, kind of give you that curated information moving forward. That's definitely the big goal. It will take some time to get there always, but that's where our heads are at with this, as always, to make it as easy to understand as we can for our families, because we know that this is overwhelming. It's learning a new language. Learning about HIE is one thing. Learning about research is quite another, and making sure that you're making the best decisions for your family and your child. So, and if you're living with HIE, we want to expand as well for adults living with HIE. So always looking down the road of what we want to grow to. And this, just to give us shout out, this is made possible with support from multiple factors. So from our general community giving and donating to Hope for HIE, our sponsors, our research partners, and grants that we are eligible for. Multiple funding sources as we grow have made this possible, and will continue to help us sustain that work. So there's my little plug. We don't try to ask often, but this magic does happen because of you out there committing to supporting this work that we do. And I hope you can see that there is many proof points of how we're able to grow this fast. We always get amazing compliments of how fast we grow, and all the work that we're doing from people out there in the world. And it's able to happen because of that support. So if you are a supporter of ours, thank you. You're the reason why we're able to bring Gina on board and accelerate this work. And we are just so grateful, Gina, that you're able to join us and help us do this work. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
All right. Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. And as always, we are here. If you need support, you can go to hie.support, and that will loop you into any support resources we have, social work, child life, peer support, all of that. And then we also, again, Gina shared about the clinical trial website. And we're always here to try to answer questions and point you to resources and information. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.